Okay, the clerk tells me that we should start by taking roll. So, Mr. Clerk.
Okay, City Council members Ammons.
Okay, we expect him to be on the phone, but maybe not yet.
Okay. Aaron, can you hear?
Ah,
There he is. Oh, okay.
he's here.
Councilman Brown.
Here.
Hazen. Right, he's
on his way. Yeah.
Jacobson. Here. Miller.
Here.
Roberts.
Here.
Wu.
Here.
Mayor Marlin.
Here.
Okay, I will entertain a motion to approve minutes of our last meeting from April 9th.
So moved.
Second.
Is there any discussion or corrections? All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Nays, no. Okay. Public input. I have just one public input slip for this time. Eldris Melinda Carr does not wish to address us, but wishes to have her position entered in the record that she has continued concerns about the Dr. Ellis subdivision sewer issues with respect to their equity and historic impact. And I have also received a slip just now from Bishop King James and Reverend Dr. Evelyn Underwood, who do not want to address the members, but ask that their position be entered into the record as being continually concerned about the Dr. Ellis subdivision sewer problem. Okay, and
They're here to be present, so just wait for them.
okay. Okay, all the other public input slips are at the time of the agenda. So we'll move on to presentations. And the first one on the agenda is Perspective, Insights of a Traffic Stop, which I believe is a video presentation.
Good evening, Mayor, council members. How are you doing this evening?
Fine.
Hey, Preston. Good,
Preston.
good. Okay, so with me today, I have Dimitri Turner Winston and Chico Lipsk. I'm gonna mess your name up, Limpskin, and they played a part in the video that we're gonna view today. It is a traffic stop video that was put together based on it wasn't a paper survey, but a verbal survey amongst about 60 of their peers, ranging from 14 to about 22, on what's some information they want to know if they had encounter with the police. What are some things you want to know? And the number one thing was, what do I do when I get stopped by the police on a traffic stop? So we're going to go into that. Then we're going to introduce the organization that they're a part of.
Every day we roll it up, yeah, we get it back. We do not feel we got the backwards up, it's get on back. Yeah, this show is back. Wait. Oh man, they're going to Jake. That was 12, bro.
Metcalf 314 final is going to be Crystal Lake Park, just north of the boathouse. Hello, sir. How you doing? I'm Officer Cassidy, Urbana Police. The reason I stopped you is back there by the boathouse. You blew the stop sign. You failed to stop at all. Also, as I was walking up, I kind of noticed you were all over the place. I saw you kind of reaching down there without reaching or anything. Is there anything going on? Were you trying to hide something, or?
No, I had just dropped my phone.
Don't reach for it. But you dropped your phone.
Yeah.
Did you get it, or?
Yeah, I got it.
It's right there. Alrighty. Do you have your license and proof of insurance?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Yeah. Let me see that. right, so I'm going to run back to my squad car. All of you just remain seated here. I'll be right back, okay? What I'm going to do is I am going to give you a citation for that, okay? And I'll be right back. If you have any questions, just wave your hand out the car. Don't get out of the car, all right?
Yes, sir.
Well, gentlemen, I want to thank you guys for coming out and participating in this video to try to hopefully instill some good information into some of our young people, especially the new drivers. I'm going to ask you, Michi, since you were the driver during the scenario, how do you feel when you get stopped by the police, and what goes through your mind?
Well, I mean, when I first get stopped by the police, you know, I first get that little feeling of nervousness, but then I then think again, you know, what if I did wrong? And if I know I did something wrong, then, I mean, I just got to take the punishment. But if I know I didn't do anything wrong, I just think, like, it's just a nervous thinking going through my head, just thinking, just stay still as possible. That's what I think in my head.
I've been driving for a very long time, and I still get nervous when the police get behind me. So that's completely understandable, especially as young drivers. So, Officer Cassidy, during the video, you observe some movement by the driver. Yeah. What going through your mind as a police officer as you're approaching the car, and what steps do you take during that contact?
So, pretty much every traffic stop, you have no clue what you're going to. You have no clue what's in the car. It does not matter if it's an old lady. You don't know what's in that car. You don't know what's going on. So my first thought is to keep myself safe and the occupants in the vehicle safe. So if I see furtive movement or they're moving around, I don't know if they're getting their insurance out of their glove compartment. I don't know if they're trying to hide a gun, trying to hide drugs. So it's something that we're aware of, and it needs to be addressed, you know, for my safety, for their safety, and for the safety of people around.
Now, in the second video, the young people were not as cooperative as they were in the first video.
How you doing, sir? I'm Officer Cassidy, Urbana Police. The reason I stopped you is you failed to stop at that stop sign by the boathouse. Okay? Also, another thing I'm kind of concerned about is you were ducking. It looked like you were tucking something away in the car or anything. Is there anything going on? I'm not looking for anything. Look, I'm not looking for anything extra. I'm just concerned. I don't know if you're trying to stow drugs, something illegal, weapon.
I wasn't reaching for nothing. I don't know what you're talking
You weren't
about.
reaching for nothing?
No. All I know is my last
I
name.
saw you reaching. What were you doing when you were reaching down by the front passenger side?
Man, I wasn't reaching.
You weren't reaching?
What are we getting pulled over for, man?
Like I said, you guys are being pulled over because you failed to stop at the stop sign,
So
okay?
can we get the ticket for the stop sign?
I'll work on that. I'm concerned about what might be in the car because of the dog. Okay. What I'm going to have you do, I'm going to have you get out and stand with Officer Robinson, okay? So can I have you step out of the vehicle, sir?
For video purposes, you chose to get them out of the car, knowing that you can also get them out of the vehicle if they are cooperative, but why are some of the reasons you would get them out of the car?
So I had a backing officer who was also on scene, Officer Robinson. I had them exit the vehicle because I'm not going to search a vehicle while people are inside of it. If there's a handgun around or something dangerous, a weapon, it's safer to have the vehicle empty. So having someone step out of the car doesn't mean they're going to be arrested. It doesn't mean they're in trouble. It's for safety.
What are some of the things that you think could have been handled differently on your guys' end to make the stop smoother?
I feel like we could have been more compliant, more like respectful to the officer. I feel like we got in hand a little bit, but not that much, you know.
I mean, to be honest, and to fix the better the situation, I would probably just keep my thoughts to myself, just answer the questions yes or no, and just be respectful. You know, you gotta give respect to earn it. So
That's a good motto. Give the respect.
Both sides.
On both sides.
From the officer
absolutely.
to the citizen, and from the citizen to the officer.
And I suppose that responding and acting accordingly in this situation would make the process of investigating the situation go by faster if you just cooperate.
You guys helped us out a lot because we kind of covered some areas that a lot of young people in your age range do. There's a lot of negative stigmas about the police out there. All police aren't the same. All departments aren't the same. All young people aren't the same. As you've seen today, each traffic stop is a social encounter between the community and law enforcement. In the first video, the driver satisfied the officer's inquiry about the movement he observed, so no further action occurred. In the second video, the driver and passenger were being uncooperative. It was clear that there was movement that raised the officer's awareness, which the occupants then denied. This prompted a different response by the officer. One of the key points we would like to drive home would be to give the same respect that you request and deserve. Thank you for watching. For more information, please contact the Human Relations Division at 217-384-2466. All right, thank you for watching that. This video is not intended to cover all possible situations. It was intended to cover a common circumstance that happened with a lot of our young people. They're playing their music, they're not paying attention to the roadways, and they're having to run stop signs. The two scenarios give helpful tips to actually more than just our young people, because I've encountered some older people who do the same things that some of the young people encounter. So I want to recognize these young people. We were missing one, Jeremy, but he had to work this evening. So I want to recognize them for their hard work, because they didn't have to do it. I want to thank you guys for coming out and helping us out.
Yeah, hello, good afternoon. I'm Dimitri, and I'm the president of the Kappa Leadership League. We pretty much, this is the vice president right here.
I'm Chico Lipscomb. I'm the vice president of Kappa League.
Yeah, just the purpose of our program is just like to help youth feel more comfortable and get more exposure as like making new friends, because we have like Champaign and Urbana kids in our program, and pretty much we're just trying to help people continue the education path. And we go on college visits. We do a lot of like community service, such as feeding the homeless.
Habitat for Humanity. We do a lot of service work all around the community for others and others in need. We did Habitat for Humanity one time. They needed help with homes and stuff like that. And yeah.
And yeah, so yeah, we just help out like young kids, just trying to continue to educate them education path, and we got a big team behind us to help us.
Okay.
So who's your parent?
The leader of our program is Frank Archie. He's the leader. He's back there, but yeah. The organization that's leading this program is the Kappa Alpha Psi.
All right, so if I can get all the Kappa members to stand for me. Y'all, young. Thank you for all the work you do in our community. Okay. Oh.
Yes, Mayor Marlin.
Well, I'd like to know how you envision using this video, and again, thank you very much. You've done a great community service here.
The plan to use this video is to get it spread out as much as possible. The good thing about using the young people is they love to see themselves on TV, so they have shared much better than I ever could. We plan on showing it at the next coalition meeting. I've already been asked to do that, and if we can get it into the schools, into the driver's ed programs, that'd be great.
Yes, Dennis.
Yeah, thanks very much. I could see that this could be the beginning of maybe like a series of videos. Obviously, you didn't cover everything. It'd be really interesting to watch a couple of other issues that come up when people are stopped. The consent search, how to respond to that. I'm remembering now that there was a really excellent video that was offered by a showing by the Libertarian Party at the library about 7 years ago, and it covered similar but actually in more depth, and also included appropriate responses that you can give to the policeman which helps guide the results of your interaction. And sometimes when you say the wrong thing, you end up, yes, having a search in your car, and if you know how to be civil or if you know what words to say, you can avoid that. And that was the point of that video. It would be really interesting to see some of these issues brought forward, and it might, I don't know if you have the resources to continue doing the filming, but it looks to me that you have some very natural actors, and it was very enjoyable to watch. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Councilman Roberts, I absolutely are looking forward to doing some more videos like this, more interactive videos using our youth to, I can't give you a number of how many we're going to get done because it takes so long to get everybody together, but we do plan on continuing that in possibly a series as well. Yes.
Any other questions or comments from council? Yes, Bill.
Yeah, I just repeat saying thanks and what a good job you did. And I think the value, I mean, anybody could put this on YouTube, but the value really is sitting down and talking to people afterwards about it, about what would you do and what have you done in the past, you know, have you made mistakes? And so I think getting that conversation started is really great. And this is a really good first step. And I hope maybe, I don't know if the school resource officers or somebody else could do like an after-school thing or just clubs or something that, you know, get people talking more about it. And hopefully it'll grow from there. Thanks.
And it looked as though the mayor wished to say another thing.
I also wanted to acknowledge the work of Jason Liggett, our staff member here, who did the video editing and production. So it was a team effort, as well as our new communication specialist who helped at the tail end of things. That's Bridget Broyhan. So.
Okay. Anything else from this side of the room? I would like then to well, just reiterate, also express my thanks, but also ask in particular about pedestrian stops, because that has also emerged as an issue. Are you planning to, specifically do that? And I would imagine that pedestrian stops occur in a very wide variety of contexts, so that might be even more varied than the traffic stop videos.
Absolutely. That is one that we've been looking at for the future.
Okay, great.
Yes. I was about to bring that up. We got to talk about Joe Cassidy as well. He did an excellent job, bringing up the fact that we need we need respect on both sides. It's not just the citizens respecting the officers need to respect the citizens as well. So Joe did an excellent job. He had some family obligations, so he couldn't make it, but we want to recognize him as well, Joe Cassidy.
Okay.
All right.
Is there any other questions? All right. Thank you, guys.
I hate to move on to the next item because everybody feels so good about this one.
Well, I get to stay here, so.
And so the next item is fix-it tickets, and I guess
Yes.
you're still up.
Thank you very much again, Council. So we're going to talk about this fix-it ticket program that we're working on. Why is it not getting big for me? Somebody tell me how to make it big. Okay, thank you very much. So, a few months ago, myself, Melissa, and Mayor Marlin got together outside of her office. This is how it kind of came about. And we was talking about different ways in which we can, I don't mean to keep looking at you, but I'm trying to get in the mic. Different ways we can communicate with the and assist the community in a positive manner instead of just always taking something when you're doing a normal traffic stop. From the department that I worked at prior to coming here, they had what they call fix-it tickets, where you can you'll get pulled over for a equipment violation. They will issue you a ticket. You'd have a certain amount of days to get this item repaired, and then you take it back to an officer and get it signed off, and then it wouldn't become a actual violation. When that information was relayed, the mayor was like, well, I don't want to have to give them a ticket at all. Is there some way we can help them? And so then we looked at some other different places where they actually gave like discounts and things of that nature. So our program, click down, how this helps our citizens. So when you get stopped by Urbana police for a vehicle violation, we understand that some people defer maintenance for, groceries, utilities, other items, and some just may not have the funds to do it at all. So this is a small way for us to be able to assist them with getting the tag light, blinkers lights, tail lights, the small headlights. Now if you hit a pole and your whole headlight is gone, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about if the bulb is blown. Then you would get what is considered to be a warning violation ticket, but they would write on the bottom of it what the violation was, like let's say rear driver's side blinker light, and that officer would give them a voucher. And that voucher, they would take the voucher with the warning ticket to one of our local parts stores, and they would get that light bulb, and the store would bill the city for that light bulb, and they would help them put it in on most cars. They can't do all cars, because some cars are a little harder to get to, but this would cover most cars. Oh, I covered that already. The plan is to start this July 1 during the next fiscal year, the next fiscal financial year. We have allocated funds from another source, which is within the HRO budget, to put into this place. So now I'll take any questions you may have.
Any questions or comments from this side? Mary Alice.
So, since Melissa gave us the numbers, equipment violations accounted for roughly 20% of the reason for the stop in the last quarter. If we have about 1,500, that's about 300 stops, about 20%, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know what percentage of those are going to be light bulbs and so
Right.
forth versus more dramatic items. Is there any estimate in terms of the proportion of equipment violation tickets / warnings that we give that
The
would be
amount
covered?
that we've estimated would be $2,500 for the
year?
year. For
That's
the
incredibly
bulbs.
cheap. Okay.
Well, it's just for the bulbs. It's not for the, we're not paying labor for them to put it in, because the store would already, they do that already. So they say they would just, just continue on. It would just be doing it for the city, or helping the city, I should say.
So for approximately $2,500, we could save people how much in ticket fines?
Well, if someone doesn't have the means to get it fixed, a lot of times they defer that even further. They get pulled over for a warning. Let's say you get pulled over for a warning on Monday. You see a county deputy on Wednesday, you hadn't got it fixed yet. They pull you over, they're going to know, via the arms contact that you just got pulled over and warned for this already. They could give them an actual ticket for that. So we would save them the extra hassle of, they give them at least a resource to help them get it done and avoid that second stop.
Okay, all right, thank you.
All right.
Mayor Marlin?
Yeah, just to follow up on that, the idea behind this is to hopefully, number one, improve safety, have
Right.
people just be able to replace their taillights or headlights that are out. Number two, to, over the long run, help reduce the number of stops, because if people do get that headlight replaced the first time they're stopped, then the chances of them being stopped again are reduced.
Absolutely.
And then 3, to reduce the financial impact of getting that equipment violation fixed. So over the long run, this is one small way to hopefully help reduce both the number of stops and the financial burden. But again, about 20% of the stops are related to equipment violations, so this gets at that segment of the stops. And we are allocating $2,500 from that is in the HRO, the Human Relations Office, for this fiscal year.
Yes, Dennis.
So, I'm not really part of the biking community the way some people on this council are, but I know that at bike rodeos that are held here by the bike clubs, a lot of times they'll offer free bike lights to people who bring their bikes in if they don't have them yet, and that's a safety issue.
Right.
I'm wondering if another step that you might take is to offer a car lamp rodeo or something, maybe on a certain day in the early summer or something, where you say that you've got a station located like in the parking lot, maybe at Lincoln Square or something, and for the morning you would give a voucher to those people who know that they've got a problem with a tail light, a license plate light. If they can come and show you that, yeah, it's not working, they could receive a voucher even before they got stopped. And I think that would be kind of a nice format for the community. I really appreciate the idea of this community outreach that the Human Relations Office is doing, and the police department in cooperation with this club, the CAPAS, the service organization. So just another format you might consider to offer and advertise this program.
Okay. Any other good ideas from up here? What a concept, elected officials having good ideas.
I love ideas.
Okay.
This is definitely in correlation with the police department, if I didn't say that earlier.
Okay. Thank you.
Anything else? Thank you.
I don't think so. I think we're going to have to let you go.
All righty, I'm gonna get out your hair.
Thank you very much.
Can you shut that down, Charlie? So I don't know.
Okay, so the next item on the agenda, the staff report, and this should be from,
I've got a couple.
oh, I'm sorry, the mayor would also like to say a couple of things. Okay.
I have a proclamation and a couple of announcements, so
Okay.
I'm going to go over here. I'm not sure there's anyone here to receive this, but I'm going to stand here anyway. This is a proclamation. This week is Administrative Professionals Week, and any of you who work in a business or a government or at the university or any corporate setting, you know the importance of administrative professionals. Oh, there's one here. Come on up, Monique. This is Monique James, Administrative Assistant in Human Relations Division. Whereas administrative professionals play an essential role in coordinating the office operations of businesses, governmental, educational institutions, and other organizations, and whereas the work of administrative professionals today requires advanced knowledge and expertise in, this is a long list, communications, computer software, office technology, project management, organization, customer service, and other vital office management responsibilities, and most importantly, have the willingness to learn and accept new challenges. And might I add, that is every single day, right? And whereas administrative professionals are vital contributors in today's teamwork-oriented work environment and are key frontline public relations ambassadors for their organizations. And whereas the International Association of Administrative Professionals has honored the important contributions of administrative support staff since 1952 and recognizes the integral and central role that these professionals play in modern business. And whereas Administrative Professionals Week celebrates the more than 22 million administrative and office support professionals working in the United States and sheds light on administrative professional skills and loyalty, attributes every office depends on. And whereas the City of Urbana salutes all of the amazing admins who positively contribute to our city offices as well as dedicate themselves to the administrative profession. Now, therefore, I, Diane Wolfe Marlin, Mayor of the City of Urbana, Illinois, do hereby proclaim April 22nd through the 28th, 2018, as Administrative Professionals Week in the City of Urbana, Illinois, and we'll just say worldwide. How about that? Okay. Congratulations. Thank you so much. I'm going to let you take that on behalf of this. And I just have a couple of announcements, so I'm going to put an advertisement up here while I'm at it. So I just wanted to let you know today we launched What's in Your Square, which is our visioning effort to get public input on the site across the street from here, the Lincoln Square site. It's about 16 square blocks in the heart of our downtown. We're asking the public, no matter where you live, for your input, your ideas. Tell us what you want to see across the street in this site. We're looking to transform the site so that it can serve us going forward for the next 50 years. So there's an online survey. You can find it if you go to the city website at urbanaillinois.us, and there's a link that'll take you to the survey. So take a few minutes, fill out the survey, or you'll see us at many events throughout the next 3 or 4 months. We'll be at the farmers market, we'll be at community events in Urbana getting public input. But really, we want the community to tell us what they'd like to see in the square. And really, the sky's the limit, because we want to transform this site to serve us going forward. So there's that one. And then I just wanted to let people know that I need to get the letter on my desk, actually. It's been a busy Monday in the city of Urbana. The city has received notification as that we move toward the end of another school year. The CU One-to-One Scholarship Foundation every year selects a business or organization that's been extremely supportive of the mentoring program in the Champaign-Urbana community as a business sponsor. So this year, the City of Urbana has been selected as the business sponsor for the CU One-to-One Scholarship Foundation. And we were selected in part because of the support and enthusiasm of a kind of lighthearted competition we had between city departments to get new mentor signups. So this was really a staff-led initiative. Liz Borman in the Human Resources Department worked with other staff members to get this friendly competition going, and the result was we have new staff members who have become mentors to young folks in the Urbana community. So I appreciate that, and we'll be, the city will be recognized next week at their annual banquet. So great thank you to staff for that. Okay, now I'm done.
Thank you. Thank you. What a wonderful meeting. The next item, wonderful in a way, but bittersweet, staff report from Chief Neitlinger.
Okay, first off, thank you for allowing me to serve as your fire chief. It's been an enjoyable almost 5 years working in this position, and this is my last meeting with the council. Wow. I'll be retiring next Monday, April 30th. I've enjoyed serving as the fire chief, and I assure you that the department is being left in experienced and very dedicated hands. During my tenure as chief, I've had the pleasure of leading hardworking, dedicated employees who ensure the safety of this community through innovative prevention programs and superior emergency services. I've got division chiefs who work tirelessly to balance administrative and operational duties. I have a prevention division committed to the safety of this community. I have firefighters who are passionate about the strength and health of the fire department. The men and women of our department have made serving the citizens of Urbana a unique and incredible experience. I've overseen several initiatives during my tenure, and I say overseen that the people in the fire department did this work. And these initiatives have enhanced operations and the service to the citizens, as well as has supported our operational staff. So among these things, if you can remember, we worked hard to improve our apparatus specifications and procurement, and that kind of reflects the changes in the needs of the community. So all the apparatus we're buying now really meets the needs of the community. A couple years ago, we overhauled the ambulance ordinance, and we put in more stringent training for the ambulance folks and a better tracking system for the response times. During the 2013 contract negotiations, we developed a program that compensates firefighters for maintaining specialty certifications. Prior to that, firefighters that stepped up and took on these special duties didn't receive any additional compensation. And we found out, actually last week we received an initial email followed up by an official notification this morning that we're becoming an ISO 1 community, and that's going to take effect August 1st. And that's a public protection classification given by the Insurance Services Office. And to talk about that just a little bit, ISO grades communities' fire protection based on a review of its fire department, of its water supply and distribution system, and of the emergency communication system. An ISO Class 1 is kind of a coveted designation for a fire department, and it's the highest grade that's awarded to a fire department by ISO. Urbana is now only one of 305 communities nationwide to achieve this rating. And I got a little chart here that shows the classifications. This thing worked a while ago. It's okay, I got a backup. Okay, nationwide, here's the chart nationwide. You can see the Class 1s in the country. There's 305. And if you add all these numbers up, that represents 43,094 fire departments nationwide, and that puts us in the top 305. That's 0.007%. Okay, on the state level, there's 16 departments in the state of Illinois with this designation, and that's out of 1,870 fire departments. So that's in the top 0.009%. So you can see when we call this a coveted designation, it's really a coveted designation. I'm extremely proud of our fire department, of MetCAD, of American Water. It's kind of a joint partnership between all of these groups. The fire department is 50% of this grading. MetCAD's 10%, and the water companies is 40% of this grading. This achievement's a testament to the department's commitment to making Urbana safe, and it reflects our dedication to providing high-quality emergency response. So, you know, when I heard last Friday that we were getting this award, I wasn't sure that I could tell you all tonight because it wasn't an official notification, and it just so happened the regional manager for the Midwest called me this morning to give me the official notification. So I'm really happy I got to tell you guys this before before I retire. So. And with that, again, thank you for allowing me to serve. Do you have any questions about this rating or anything?
Yeah, Dennis.
All right, so you're not really, you're kind of a shy guy, I think. And I just wanted to say that I totally appreciate the service that you've done to our community. You've been very efficient. You've been congenial. and I think you've really improved the feeling that we've had on the fire department, that we have a very solid fire department, a very loyal one to the city. I think they've been very cooperative in a lot of different instances that have been difficult. And I just want to share my favorite snapshot image of you as a fire chief. And it occurred when the visitors from our sister city in France, Thionville, came to visit us, and they ended up becoming 20 minutes late in the program schedule because they were fascinated by the fire department, and they wanted to climb up and down on the ladder truck, and they wanted to sit in the ladder, in the truck seats, and take photographs. And they brought over from France a fire chief's helmet. I guess it was a symbolic. I'm not sure if it was actually used by the fire chief over there. They have a little bit more of a sense of pomp and circumstance and ceremony. And they presented that fire helmet to you, and you wore it. And I want to say that it was a golden helmet that reminded me of something that the hero Perseus would have worn in a Greek myth. And I thought that you looked absolutely great in it, and I don't think anybody knew that, because it happened in a small room with about 17 people in it, and I just wanted to say that was a snapshot moment for me. You became a Greek hero god of fire.
That helmet's on display on the second floor in the showcase, if you want to see it. Thank you.
Any other comments, questions? Yes, Mayor Marlin.
Well, I just want to congratulate you again on your retirement. It's been a pleasure working with you over the past year. Brian's always he's even-tempered, and no matter what comes his way, he maintains his cool. He's served the city of Urbana for over 25 years, and that includes some time at the University of Illinois before he came to the city. And then he also served as a volunteer with the fire department in the Catlin Fire Protection District. So fire has been his life, his entire career, and you've certainly earned a retirement and the opportunity to spend a lot more time in that cabin on the hilltop.
Yeah.
And I won't disclose the location, and it's fitting for a Greek god to be on a hilltop somewhere. So thank you very much for your service.
Appreciate it.
So I just, a parting thought, I just couldn't help it. I'm a movie buff, so I wanted to mention that one of my favorite portrayals of a fire chief in the movies is Steve Martin in Roxanne. And if you haven't seen that.
I've seen that.
You've seen that?
Yeah.
So we could, so I'm going to carry that image and say, yeah, that's like our fire chief.
Okay.
I'm sorry, but you don't have the nose.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is.
And tomorrow there's like a ceremonial moment for you. It's called a walkout, is that correct?
The walkout will be next Monday at 2 o'clock,
Monday at 2 o'clock.
and it'll be down in the Station 1 truck bay.
Okay.
So you're all invited.
Okay.
Okay.
Chief, is that too loud?
I can hear it.
Chief, I just wanted to thank you for your service, and I will have an opportunity to talk to you afterwards or, in the coming days, but thank you again for everything, and I wish you well.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Now we move on.
Counselor?
Oh, yes. Aha. Sustainability Coordinator.
Scott Tess, City of
Scott
Urbana
Tess.
Sustainability Coordinator. I just wanted to quickly direct your attention to a couple of items in the packet. The first is an announcement for our upcoming rain barrel and compost bin sale. We are once again competitively selecting a vendor to provide this sale in partnership with the City of Urbana, City of Champaign, and University of Illinois Extension Service. We are able to drive down the price by about half compared to market for rain barrels, and then folks in Urbana and Champaign have the opportunity to use a stormwater utility rebate and take another quarter off the price of a rain barrel. So we're engaging folks in water conservation with home rain barrel purchases so they can capture stormwater off of their own roof and use it for gardening. And then we're also selling compost bins at the sale for folks to do composting in their own backyard and reducing waste and also producing organic fertilizer for their garden. So a very nice opportunity. I encourage everyone to pre-order online. There's information on the flyer about pre-ordering because there is a lot of folks. There will be about 200, 300, 400 rain barrels sold that day. So if you pre-order, you will get through the line faster. I also wanted to direct your attention to the Environmental Sustainability Division's annual report in the packet. And I just wanted to point out two highlights. First, as a reminder, we're again using this format. It's not a listing of everything we do in the year, but rather a high-level presentation of charts and graphs with a couple of sidebars. But I wanted to point your attention to page 3, the first chart. This is the community greenhouse gas emissions chart. A couple of changes this year. One, there is an addition, we've removed the 80% reduction dotted line on that chart. So as we move from left to right in time, we want the colored bars to decline. That would represent a decline in greenhouse gases. There used to be an 80% reduction. That was our old greenhouse gas reduction goal by 2050. Council adopted a new 2040 100% or carbon neutral reduction. So you see a dotted line at the very bottom. That's our final goal. But we kept the 25% reduction that was in our original climate action plan. That's the top dotted line. And you'll see that we are just 1% away from that 25% reduction by 2020, which was listed in our original climate action plan. So there was a substantial reduction in the last 2 years in community greenhouse gas emissions. We do that inventory every 2 years. In opposing years, we do a city facilities and city facilities operations greenhouse gas inventory. That chart is at the bottom of the page. So that's really encouraging. It's hard to say, whether that trend will continue, whether there was some unique circumstances in the 2017 calendar year, but it's very encouraging nonetheless. I also wanted to point your attention to page 5 in the green sidebar. The second paragraph discusses a new state statute that changes how manufacturers will be providing funding for electronics recycling. This is really important for our community because the previous formula wasn't providing enough opportunity for the recycling of CRT TVs and monitors. Those are the big three-dimensional TVs and monitors. And we were spending more and more money out of the city funds to provide that service, and it still wasn't enough, and we're running into illicit dumping of TVs. So we're very hopeful that as this law is implemented, we'll get more funding and more adequate funding for electronics recycling. And I want to point out that statute was in part made possible by an organization called the Product Stewardship Council. It's a subsidiary of the Product Stewardship Institute, which is national. And recycling coordinator Courtney Kwong is the co-chair of that organization. So they've only been around for a couple of years and are already showing some really good success improving recycling rates. With that, I'll take any questions you have.
Yeah.
Dennis?
Unfortunately, I know an abandoned television set in a parkway near me. What's your advice?
So any nuisance refuse on a private property or the right-of-way adjacent to a private property, which the owner is responsible for, can be reported to Public Works as a nuisance complaint, and we'll talk with the property owner to abate that nuisance.
Okay. Other questions or comments? Okay, I feel rather daunted by the task of getting down to zero in just 22 years. I will be 101 years old by that time, so I will probably not contribute much to the carbon footprint, but I wish the community well. Any other? Okay, thank you. Any other staff reports? Or okay, so now moving on, the next item on the agenda is resolution number 2018-04-013R. It is a return of the partnership program loan documents between the City of Urbana and Bristol Place Residences.
I just
this
wanna-
is community development. Okay.
Thank you. I just wanted to provide an update on that. We have reached out to the developer, and they've provided comments on the topics that were listed on the update memo that went out. We're currently working with them and their attorney to work through those and to finalize the documents. We hope to do that early this week, get the other comments from the other funding partners, and stay on track to provide the finalized documents for the May 7th meeting. And other than that, I just wanted to be here for questions, and also note that representatives from the developer and the City of Champaign are also here and able to answer questions if you have any.
Okay. Yes, Dennis.
I seem to have kind of a talkative night. It doesn't seem to be an action item at this point, but it's on our agenda. How do we maintain, what's the best call for us to continue it to the May 7th meeting?
That would actually be a council meeting. We are
Yes.
recommending approval of the resolution for the committee of the whole to recommend approval of, and acceptance of it at the council meeting on the 7th. Yeah.
So the appropriate thing would be to advance it to council
Yeah.
with or maybe without. We don't have any actual final data, though, to make our judgment on, so what's the deal?
That's it's something that we're working on with the developers right now. We're hammering it out, and we should have finalized documents in the next couple of days.
So probably no recommendation would be a wiser way to go.
Okay.
So I'll make a motion that we forward this to the city council meeting with no recommendation at this time.
I'll second.
Okay. Any more discussion? Okay. In favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Ayes have it. Thank you. And the next item on the agenda is IDOT update from Police Department.
Yeah, you have.
We do have public comment on this. So, Darrell, do you wish to make your comment prior to or after the presentation?
Right after the presentation?
Sure. Yeah, I think that can be your preference. You could do it now, or you could do it immediately after the presentation. Okay, fine.
Is that the only one?
I lose it if it's not on my keys. Okay, so this is the presentation that is the quarterly dashboard update. So the information here focuses on quarter 4, 2017, and quarter 1, 2018. So this is from October 1st to March 31st, looking at a rolling 6 months. Okay, so I'm going to run through the number of stops that we've completed, the motivation for stop, reason for stop, racial disparities, and outcome of traffic stops, as I'd outlined previously on how we were going to try and do these quarterly data dashboard updates in the most efficient way. All right, so when we do the 5-year average, it's quarter 4 and quarter 1 of 2016 to 2017, 2015 to 2016, and so forth. So we're just looking at quarter 4 and quarter 1, so it's not the full 5 years. This controls for seasonality. Traffic patterns are different. Traffic enforcement is different over the summertime. So we're just looking at this 6 months compared to the quarter 4 to quarter 1 of the previous 5 years to make sure that we're controlling for the seasonality aspect of this. So in the last 6 months, the Urbana Police Department conducted 1,548 traffic stops. That's compared to 1,790 for the 5-year average. When we take into account the variation that has occurred in the past 5 years, that is not outside of the standard deviation, so that's not outside what a normal fluctuation would be. So that's traffic stops are lower, but it's within our normal variation. When we look at the percent of step stops, so the Strategic Traffic Enforcement Program, a higher percentage of our stops in the last 6 months were step stops compared to the quarter 4 to quarter 1 5-year average. That is outside of the standard deviation. It is outside of one standard deviation, so it is a notable increase in the percentage of traffic stops that were conducted during STEP. This is a density of the traffic stops that we have conducted in the last 6 months. There are a couple of different ways to do this. This is the straight up density. What happens here, though, is we miss some of the, when the intersections are more spread out, like we see on Windsor, and they're really concentrated in here, so you're gonna see more concentration here, even though we do stops out on Windsor. This is another way to do it, and it's not without error, but it's still a different way to see it. So you can kind of see that the traffic stops are spread out over the city. The red line, we've done 20 to 79 on that street segment, so you can kind of see where some of these things concentrate at the street level. When we look at the motivation for stop, we only started doing this in 2016, so we're comparing the last year's 6 months to this year's 6 months. A higher percentage of our stops now are motivated by a traffic issue. Fewer are motivated by community caretaking, and fewer still are motivated by targeted patrol. And targeted patrol continues to make up a very small percentage of the overall traffic stops. So there's the motivation for the officer initiating the stop that IDOT does not require that we collect for ourselves, and then the reason for the stop, which is the legal violation of whatever it is that began the initiation, the vehicle code violation. So for the last 6 months, 73% was for a moving violation. That is more than it had been for the past 5 years. And it is outside of one standard deviation, so that is a notable difference. And then equipment violations are within range, and then license and registration violations went from about 10% to about 6.6%. That is outside of so we've done a higher percentage of stops for moving violations and a lower percentage of stops for license and registration violations, and those are meaningful differences. And the racial disparity. All right, the yellow line is 1. So as a reminder, we take the percentage of drivers that we stop by race, and we divide it by the percentage of drivers in Urbana that are involved in traffic accidents. So if we had a driving population of 25% Asian drivers, we would expect to stop 25% Asian drivers, all else being equal. So if a disparity ratio is higher than 1, it means that racial group is more likely to be stopped than we would expect based on what the driving population is. So for our 5-year quarter 4, quarter 1 average, African American drivers were 53% more likely to be stopped than we would expect. That's a very low standard deviation, so there's not a lot of variation across the last 5 years. For the last 6 months, that disparity ratio is now 1.37, so an African American driver is still 37% more likely to be stopped than we would expect, but that is statistically significant. It's a lower disparity ratio than we've run in the past. And we stopped 416 African American drivers the last 2 quarters. Asian drivers disparity ratio maintained the same. Caucasian drivers went from 15% less likely to be stopped than we would expect to about 9% less likely to be stopped than we would expect. That number, that disparity ratio for the last 5 years, was very constant. There was a very low standard deviation, so that is also 3 standard deviations away from what our average is, so it's a pretty significant shift. Hispanic drivers stayed within range. This was not in the report because I didn't have the ability to pull it yet, but I do now. So starting January 1 of 2018, so this is now just looking at quarter 1. IT made it able so that the service representatives were able to enter in the beyond scope checkbox that we had added to the traffic tickets the previous year that had to be counted by hand and was really challenging to do. So I appreciate that it's now able to be entered in electronically, and now I can pull it. So of the 808 stops that we conducted from January 1 to March 31st, we questioned 38 drivers beyond the scope of the traffic stop. 20 of them were because it ended in something more serious than that. So it was a DUI, it was a warrant arrest, it was any of those things. So this is an error, and it should say percent of all stops. So 4.7% of all stops resulted in the driver being questioned beyond the scope. When you look at the racial breakdown, we questioned 7 Caucasian drivers, we questioned 29 African American drivers, 2 Hispanic drivers, and 0 Asian drivers. I broke down the more serious than traffic stops, so something that's a warrant arrest or a DUI or any of the other things that are more serious than a traffic violation. So that was 3 Caucasian drivers, 15 African American drivers, and 2 Hispanic drivers. Drilling it down further, I was looking at there's a text that the officers will write on the ticket. So there, 18 people were questioned that did not lead to something more serious than a traffic violation. Drivers were questioned about, I don't even remember, minor things. There were several of them that the officer smelled cannabis and found shake, and then they destroyed it at the scene, and we didn't end up writing anything more serious than a traffic violation for it. And then people were questioned about their license status and things like that. So it's a very small percentage of all traffic stops, but I'm glad to be able to report it here. Yes. And then looking at the disparity ratio of the outcomes. Now we move to a different denominator. Before we were looking at the denominator of all of the driving population of Urbana. This denominator is the percentage of drivers that we have stopped. So we know the percentage of drivers that we stop based on the race, based on what the officer writes down. So if we stop, 25% of our stops are Asian drivers, we would expect then Asian drivers to make up 25% of our citations. So anything outside of that represents either an over or an under representation based on what the stopped population is. So the ones that are outside of the range, a Caucasian driver is now 5% more likely than we would expect to receive a citation compared to 1% more likely for the 5-year average. And a Caucasian driver is now less likely to receive a warning than they were in the past 5 years. And that's it for the Z. And then in the report, I don't have the straight up numbers, so that helps to at least lend some context to it, because we're breaking out 1,500 stops, and then we're breaking it out by outcome, and then we're breaking it down by race, so that can result in some small numbers. So some of these should be interpreted with a bit of caution. So the 2.29 disparity ratio for more serious stops for African American drivers is higher than any of the other disparity ratios on here. That's 26 stops that resulted in something that was more serious for African American drivers. So while it's a big disparity ratio, it's a really small number, and we know from past analysis that most of those are non-discretionary, so it's warrants and it's felonies. So overall, for the dashboard update, our number of traffic stops is lower, but it's within the normal range. A higher percentage of our stops are step traffic stops. A higher percentage were initiated with traffic safety as a motivation, more moving violations as the reason for stop, lower license and registration violations. There was a meaningful increase in the Caucasian disparity ratio and a meaningful decrease in the African American disparity ratio. There are very few stops that result in questioning beyond the scope of the traffic stop, and a majority of those are things that end up more serious than a traffic stop as the final outcome. And Caucasian drivers are more likely to receive a citation and less likely to receive warnings than expected based on the stopped population, and that change is outside of the normal variation that we've seen in the past. Questions?
Hey, Yes, Dean.
Remind me, how did we adjust for people who are coming here from out of town? How do you?
We use the denominator that the state uses when they put out their report is the adjusted census population, which is any adult that reports that they live in Urbana that's age of 14 or older, so not quite adult. What we find when we look at our numbers is that about half the people that we stop here don't live here. So what we do as a proxy is we use the drivers involved in traffic accidents as the denominator. So that accounts for the variation in the people that drive here versus people that live here. It's a rolling 3-year average because we don't have as many traffic violations or as many accidents as we do, but it's...
Just took me a moment to compute that. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I apologize, I violated protocol a little bit. I think it's Mr.
Oh,
Cruz's
sorry.
turn, and then it's council's turn to weigh in and ask questions.
Apologies.
Good evening. I'm Darrell Cruz. First of all, I would like to thank you for including the traffic stop information in the minutes or the packet. It's been very helpful to be able to read it ahead of time and be able to respond accordingly, and hopefully you'll continue to do that. So I thank you for making that happen. Secondly, I guess I'm looking forward to the data. It was alluded to tonight a little bit, the questioning beyond the scope of the traffic stop. It wasn't in the initial data. I was looking forward to see that, so it's nice to see a preliminary outcome of that being included. Also, I think it's noteworthy to note that the racial disparity is down to 1.37. That's the lowest disparity that's been reported since 2004. It's never been that low in the history of reporting in the city of Urbana. I think that's significant. I remember talking to Dr. Weiss, the consultant, and asked him, you know, what would be a statistical goal that would be reasonable to achieve? And a number of years ago, he said 1.25, about 25% statistically you could live with because of the variety and extenuating circumstances involved in traffic stops. I hope the Urbana Police Department or the City Council has a goal, and I would encourage you to talk about that a little bit tonight. It's interesting, the disparity is 1.49, it went down to 1.37 in 6 months. If that trend could continue, the next report, that would be exactly at 1.25. It's doable if you want it to happen. I do have some recommendations I would like you to consider and discuss as part of your discussion also with the Urbana Police Department. First of all, I'm a little confused about the rationale for the current presentation schedule. There was one in July that included quarters 1 and 2, then in November's quarter 2 and 3, so there was an overlapping the data of 2 quarters, and now in April we're having quarter 4 and 1 and 2 different years. I'm just might suggest, why not just have quarter 1 and 2, 3 and 4, and then the end of year report that the UPD puts together, so it's every 6 months within a calendar year. That's somewhat systematic. There's been some inconsistency in the report, and it just might be easier to interpret and follow if something like that would be done. I also think it would be informative, and I know this is dashboard data, but if it comes up, especially every 6 months, it would be worth having a line graph with the number of stops and the number of accidents in the report. For 5 years now, the stop numbers have declined from 4,309 stops to this 2017 to 290 stops. That's a 32% drop in stops. I would like to know, and I would hope you would like to know, what is the line of accidents during that 5-year period? It may be flat. It may parallel with it, which is significant in terms of information for decision making for you and for the UPD in terms of officer allocation of time. I would like to suggest that, again, that you institute a trial period of feedback cards. I noticed tonight you're offering vouchers, and I think there's one dimension of the data that's still missing, and that's driver input regarding the experience of the traffic stop. And any traffic stop that occurs that does not involve an arrest, it would be simple to provide a feedback card to that driver to give you a perspective that currently is in the data. You could try it for 6 months. The cost is nominal. If you can hand out a voucher, you can hand out a feedback card. I know the shortcoming of the dashboard data, one of the major shortcomings is the racial group. All the information is just by the 4 racial groups. It is very difficult to see and understand what is happening to people without further disaggregation. And by that I mean, it would be extremely helpful, I think, to have data disaggregated further by gender and age groupings in addition to race. And the reason I say that, and age groupings could be very simple, like 15 to 24, 25 to 34, 35 to 44, 45 and older. This is is that a minute, or can I have
Yeah, I'll suggest that we go give them another minute.
I'll second.
In favor?
Aye.
Okay, go for it.
Thank you. I think that age group categories are extremely important in here, and I'm going to be quite frank, there's no way to see where the improvements are occurring or how they're impacting different age groups. And one of the key groups we need to know about is young, black, African Americans in this group. And there's no way to pull that out of there, that lower age group. Finally, the last thing I would say, and I think this is the most important thing for you to talk about amongst yourselves in the City Council, and that is we must know if these improvements we are seeing can be attributed to intentional changes made by the UPD to traffic stop policy or procedure, or if there has been no institutional change, for if there isn't any, there likely will be no sustained improvement over time. So there's a need for some clarity and transparency. I'm still confused as to what exactly the mayor and the chief were referring to as implementing in January 1st. And I would politely ask the mayor or the chief to just repeat them for the benefit of the public, and then comment whether they feel those changes are resulting in the positive trends we're seeing. I hope the improving numbers are not random, but due to effective and thoughtful changes by the UPD that will result in continued and permanent change. So if you address and talk about some of those things, I think it would be extremely helpful.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And I'm sorry for going over.
Any questions or comments for Mr. Cruz, either by council or if staff cares to say anything to that point? Okay, thank you very much. And now, council and mayor for other, Chief Morgan would like, Chief Morgan will be able to receive. Sure, okay. Yes, Bill.
Yeah, thanks. This is really helpful, having it in this format. I know we looked at age several times over the past years. I don't remember if we had something in the annual, I don't think we had anything in the annual report with the breakdown by age either, but we might, if you want to look at that again, maybe if there's something that would help us see that young African American age group better
So
broken
it's
down by stops.
to do it with small numbers is problematic. I would need to extend back and not just look at the last 6 months, because when I break it down by age and then race and then
Okay.
it just
And then I think that was one of the reasons why we were doing that quarterly report, Daryl, that we were trying to do it every quarter, but using the past 2 quarters. So it was kind of a rolling 6-month period, so that we'd have enough numbers to make it statistically significant. So we could go to just 6 months and not do the overlap, if that's clear, but then we wouldn't get the quarterly report. We'd get it every 6 months. So I think, to me, it looked like the main driver of some of these changes was the increase in step stops. I mean, that, according to some of our other earlier data, it looks like the step stops were less disparate and also more likely to lead to citation. So that would explain some of those significant numbers. So is that something that's intentional, just kind of to focus more on more traffic issues using step stops rather than day-to-day operations, or is it?
I think why the percentages of step stops has changed is because the overall number of traffic stops have gone down. So if you were to break it down between step and non-step stops, so if we reduce the amount of number, we do relatively the same amount of step details as we have for the past several years. So
Okay.
I don't know if that's exact,
Yeah,
but
there's been some
there's
variation.
some fluctuation, but I think that accounts for some of that change.
So the actual number of step stops hasn't changed that much, but by
the percentage
percentage-wise,
that it
it's
makes up for the
Right.
overall traffic stops.
Okay. And then on the beyond the scope, I don't know if you, do you still have that handy, that slide?
Well, yeah, let me pull it up.
I remember that I couldn't, there's an 808 number, what did
That was so we just started entering this into
okay.
the service reps just started entering this in January 1. So I only have it
It's for the last quarter.
without digging through 1,500 tickets to
Okay.
try and find the correct ones. So there were 18 of them that did not result in something more serious than a traffic violation. So if we question somebody, most of the 20 were DUIs, driving under the influence of drugs or alcohol, or driving under a revoked license, because that's not something that we know when we stop somebody, and so then it's questioning beyond the scope of a traffic
Those
stop.
kind of things would be in the 20s?
We had 20 stops.
20 of those?
Yeah.
And so 38 total. In the 18, would that be something like what we saw in the video where, you know, you
Yep.
thought there might be something more serious, but then you get everybody out of the car, you might handcuff a few people, and then you find nothing?
Yeah.
So
That
so
would
that's,
that would fall
be
under
in
the
that
beyond scope, but not more serious.
beyond the scope, but not more serious. Okay, thanks. That's all I had.
Any other questions or comments? Yes, Mary Alice.
So just going back to the beyond scope, you have roughly about 2%, does that sound right, that are not warrants, but are beyond scope, so 18 out of 808, about 2%.
Yeah.
So pretty low.
Right, and some of it does result in action. So when I pull up the descriptions, there are several of them that are, smelled cannabis, took, destroyed, like shake, and so things that we're just writing traffic tickets for. It doesn't elevate it to
I
a
was on a
police
stop
report
like that.
So yeah.
Yes, yes. Not me, I wasn't the one smoking.
Yeah.
But people that were stopped were. I think it's an interesting idea to include the accidents, the percentage of accidents that we have in the quarter, just so we kind of know roughly what's going on.
Yeah.
That would be helpful. And then I think it would be, I like the two maps that you created, the GIS maps that you created, and that would just be handy to have so that we can compare them over time. I noticed that, can you pull up the heat map for a moment?
Yeah. The big
So
one
if you
or the
look
side by
at,
side?
if you look at the heat map over there on High Cross Road, I know you and I had talked a little bit about that being an anomaly in the past, and so now it looks like that's another hot spot.
Yeah, of traffic accidents. So it's Walmart that's
Right.
over there, and so it's people coming and going from Walmart. And when I do it for the accidents too, that's reflected there as well.
So do you think that's part of the reason why we're seeing a shift in racial disparities, is because we have more stops on that High Cross Road?
So we're using we can use the data to drive where we're putting the step stops. So if we see more accidents somewhere, like we are seeing out there on High Cross Road, and we can also look at personal injury accidents. So accidents that aren't just people calling in to report it, and then it's just property damage where an ambulance is dispatched to the scene. So we can use the data to drive decisions.
So do you know roughly the percentage of stops that occur in these hot spots? So would you say 80%, 50%, 20% that are shown on this map?
I
A
don't.
rough guess.
I don't. I know that the line one is a better representation of most of the stops, because most of those street segments had 4 or more stops on it, so that should cover most of them, but without,
Okay.
I can do it with the line one. I can't do it with the other one easily, or really, it would take a significant, I can do it with a line one kind of quickly.
No,
though.
it doesn't need a lot of work. I'm just
Okay.
curious in terms of the things that are represented on the map, what
Yeah.
proportion of the stops are actually represented on the map. Okay, that's what I have for now. Thank you so much for putting this report together. I think it's a big improvement, a big step forward, so thank you for that.
Other, yes, Jared.
To follow up from Durrell's question, do we have any direct response to his question of what has been done to have gotten us to where we are today?
Yeah, I mean, we did the reevaluation of the step locations, and we adjusted those accordingly. And then we also had the where we, I don't want to say retraining, isn't really retraining, but a lot of conversation and about how we strategically police with the patrol officers. And those were the two things that we talked about back in December when we were speaking about kind of making some changes January 1.
Yes, Mayor Marlin.
So I would characterize those changes as being both thoughtful and intentional and strategic, and that's why you're seeing the preliminary results that you see tonight, and I expect the trend to continue downward. And I want to thank Chief Morgan and Melissa, Lieutenant Fitzgerald, and the entire police department for cooperating in this effort.
Dennis.
Yeah.
Hello?
Oh,
Let our
Aaron, yeah.
online person talk.
Okay, Aaron, yes.
Okay, so I would also like to make sure that we thank everyone who's involved in this effort. Certainly the police department is playing an important role, but the community and individuals like Darrell Cruz and other people who have come forth to work on this, and the task force in various other different ways are also contributing to this. It is not just the Urbana Police Department. The other thing I'd like to make sure that I have a clear understanding of is the reevaluation of the STEP program. What does that mean? What was reevaluated? What did you find?
So the Sergeant Charles is in charge of our STEP program and the placement of where the steps are. He worked very closely with Melissa. They looked, and she might be able to deal with a little bit more in detail on how they kind of looked at the data and accidents and came up with some different locations that might be a little bit more effective in dealing with some of the accidents and those sort of things.
Yeah, so I did
Can you speak into the microphone
Sorry, using this fancy mapping software. I was able to overlay both the average annual daily transportation counts from the Department of Transportation with our accidents. I could break that down by just all accidents and then personal injury accidents and then also DUIs. And then we overlaid that together, and from those we were able to help focus where our resources could be best used to enforce different types of traffic infractions.
So, Melissa, are you saying that those changes, that reevaluation, and I know this is what you're saying for the most part, but you're so immersed into the data and using the terminology, sometimes I think standard deviation and Z-scores may go over a few people's head. You know, maybe not Dean, but a few other people. What did you ultimately, can you say that sort of in layman's terms, you found out that we were better off or we were more equitable in putting police officers where?
So we're not going to necessarily divulge where we've changed our step locations from or to. I just don't think that that's going to serve what we're trying to accomplish at the police department. But I believe that we have, through looking at the accident data and the density of where the traffic is in our city and try to refocusing that is part of what has helped us accomplish this reduction.
Okay, So, Melissa, when you look at the beyond the scope information, where you have 29 African American drivers who were stopped beyond the scope, and 15 resulted in more serious offenses, those are all, and Chief Morgan, maybe you could answer this, those are all mandatory arrests?
So it doesn't necessarily mean that it's arrest. It's just something that results in a non-traffic violation that gets a police report. So it could have been an arrest. It could not have been an arrest. The number is very small. I didn't drill it down any further than just saying these resulted in something, a more serious outcome, and these did not.
Well, one of the things that you said, Melissa, was that those were non-discretionary and felonies. And I thought if it was a felony, then the person would have had to have been arrested. Is that correct, Chief Morgan?
It's possible that I misspoke. Those are not arrests. Those are things that resulted in things that are more serious. So when I was briefly looking at them, and I don't have the actual, like the breakdown of each of the 20, many of them were driving under revoked. Many of them were driving under the influence, and then there were a couple of warrants. So those specifically would have resulted in arrest, but without, I can't answer for sure if all of them did.
So when you say you misspoke, you're saying that these were not all felony stops? Is that what you're saying?
Right, that's correct. I cannot say that they were all felony stops.
The reason why I'm driving on that, Melissa, and I know you've been working hard on this, I'm not trying to pull you out or put you on Front Street. What I'm saying is that we're dealing a lot with the perception of the African American community and our drivers, that somehow we deserve to be stopped more. That's some of the undertone and some of the conversations that we hear on a regular basis. So to say that they were felonies is a very it just sort of feeds that narrative. That's why I'm driving home that that's not necessarily the case. That these more serious things are not something that conjures up into the minds of our listeners or of the citizens of Urbana, that there's some derelict person or some dangerous person who was taken off the streets because of these 15 beyond the scope arrests or 15 beyond the scope data points that we see here. I just want to make sure that we have some context to that. And so when I also look at the 7 beyond the scope for Caucasian and 2 beyond the scope for Latinos, how do you explain, given the changes that we've made with the reevaluation and STEP, how do you explain that disparity between Caucasian drivers 7-3, African Americans 29, and Latinos 2 and Asians 0?
I'm not sure that I quite understand your
So
question.
in the beyond the scope, which is asking questions beyond the scope of the stop,
Right.
is that correct?
Yes.
Is that what that
Yeah,
means?
yes, that's correct.
Okay, so that was 7 for Caucasians, 29 for African Americans, 2 for Latinos, and 0 for Asians. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Based upon the data and the changes that have been made in the STEP, why is that number still such a high disparity?
Well, I don't think that's something that we would be able, I can't specifically answer that without looking at every single ticket, and that's not something that we have done previous to tonight, to be able to answer that question. I don't think I can intelligently answer that question as I sit here.
So one of the reasons why I raised that question is because in order for, and this could be a very legitimate reason, that if it's beyond the scope of the stop, then there's something else happening that is causing the officer to say or to ask more questions.
Yes.
So to put up that number and to see it to be such a high number for African Americans, and then say that there's 15 more serious stops, and to misspeak and say that they're non-discretionary and felonies, that feeds a particular narrative, and I'm asking for clarity to clarify what that is. Why is that number 29 for African Americans? What is happening in those stops that's making the officers ask them questions beyond the scope?
Yeah, I understand the question. I'm telling you I can't answer it right now.
Okay. And the last thing for me is when I look at the looking at the 4.8%, 4.87 beyond the scope. Melissa, you said that was a few stops. You used the terminology "few" in your presentation.
Yes.
But yet, when you look at some 1.53 ratio to 1.37, you say that's significant. Why is 4.87 considered just a few percentage points beyond the scope, but 1.53 to 1.37 is seen as a significant change?
So 38 stops out of 808 is not very many. So we don't, of all of the traffic stops that we conduct, we don't ask very many people questions beyond the scope of the stop. 20 of them are, they're marking it because it's a DUI, or it's something that, you know, you're going to question somebody beyond the scope. So really there's 18 that are beyond the scope of the stop that don't result in anything beyond a traffic stop. When we're looking at the decrease in the disparity ratio, we have past data for that. So we know what it's been in the past, and we can go all the way back to 2004. I'm using the last 5 years, but then we can see generally what it has been and see what the changes have been for the exact same time period over the last 5 years. When we do that, we know that the scores don't deviate more than 0.05 away from whatever that 5-year average is. That's one standard deviation. So when we reduce it from 1.53 to 1.37, it's a significant change when you're looking at it statistically.
And that number, I think you spoke to it earlier, 1.53 to 1.37 amounts to how many less stops in this in comparison for this 6-month period?
Well, so that's a tricky question to answer because we reduced the total number of stops as a function of being within our average, but then the proportion within the stops that we completed is what results in the decrease in the disparity ratio. So I can tell you that for Q4 and Q1 for the last 5 years, we stopped an average of 518 African American drivers, and for the last 6 months, we stopped 416 African American drivers.
Okay. So just using that math and that statistical analogy or breakdown, we're talking about 112 less in the same period of time.
In the same period. But we also conducted how many fewer traffic stops overall, so it's not a straight comparison.
Okay. So the overall reduction also contributes to the overall reduction for African Americans.
Correct.
All right. The last thing I'll say, and then I'll leave this alone, and this is in response to Mr. Cruz. What is the goal for us? I believe our goal is to have a 1.0 or less, so that's the same as Asians or the same as Caucasians in our community and that goal should be 1.0 for everybody or less. So I believe that's what the goal is. Okay, that's it for me.
Okay, further questions or comments? Yes, Bill.
Just one thought on the new Fix-It program. Will we have a way from our statistics to tell if there's fewer repeat equipment violations as a result of that program? Will we have a way to measure the success of that program?
I think, yeah, I don't know how easily that'll be to look at. We have so few equipment violations, and rarely do we ever write an actual ticket for it. They're usually warnings. More often than not, they're warnings. But yeah, to just look at repeat offenders for equipment violations, I don't know how difficult that would be. And
maybe we could see an overall drop in equipment violations.
That's what I was thinking, was that hopefully we'll know how much reimbursement we're giving out, which that we're having some gauging the benefits there, and then that was my other thought, was maybe we would reduce the equipment violation stops.
And was the disparity higher in equipment violations?
I think generally it's lowest in moving violations, and then moderately higher in equipment violations, and then
okay, so that should help.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, and so we could look at the total percentage of all stops that make up equipment violations, but it would be it would be challenging to
yeah.
do the repeat stuff, especially, I mean, half of the people that we stop here don't live here. So you're driving here, you're driving in Champaign, you're driving in Rantoul, you're driving all over the place. So if it's fixed here, then you're also less likely to get stopped elsewhere. So this is beyond just Urbana.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, Dennis.
Well, I do think that that the discussions that you've had in quarters in the police department concerning practice during the traffic stops, also awareness, increasing awareness of the police officers to be sensitive to what they're doing and to be aware as they're doing it, must contribute to the reductions that we've seen, because I think that the initiator, of course, is the policeman who makes the stop. And so if they are becoming more aware and becoming more responsible, becoming more sensitive to the actions that are happening and they're responding to, I think that this has to be one way of improving this disparity ratio in the long run. So I'm not going to dismiss that. I think that there might be other factors that also contribute to it. It could just be the kinds of people that happen to get stopped during a certain quarter, and it might just be chance. But I think that it shows the right direction, and I appreciate, Chief Morgan, your leadership in trying to make that occur. So I'm just going to say that.
Thank you.
Okay. Anybody? Oh, yes, Jared.
So one thing Aaron's comments made me think of in those beyond scope stops is that, so there were 18, 4 of them were attributed to Caucasian drivers that didn't result in something larger, and 14 were attributed to African American drivers that didn't result, which, you know, I get what Aaron was getting at. Is there room in there perhaps for us to have a discussion about what happened with those? I mean, I guess it's probably too much detail to go into, you know, out into a meeting like this, but is that information that you would be able to share with me, like what happened on those 14 and the other 4 as well?
Yeah, we have the information. I assume it's on the ticket, so that's something I can pull the 18 of them.
Sure. I just feel like there's a room right there in that particular instance to have an educational discussion about, okay, well, what happened in this particular situation versus these other situations, and why were there so many more of these than there were of those? And you see what I'm getting at?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? I'll just ask one other, well, it's sort of a comment tied to a question. Would I be, if I paraphrased your change in patrolling strategy to say that you were using the improved information technology to more precisely target the areas that have a worse accident history, would that, but that you don't want to say exactly where it is because you like people to think that they might get a ticket anywhere. Would that be an accurate paraphrase?
That is an accurate paraphrase for what we did with the STEP program, yes.
Okay. Okay. If there is no other thing that needs to be said, then this meeting is adjourned.